Ready or not, it's Momentous Live episode,
Ready or not, here we come.
and you should probably go at this point. Hi, I'm
Yeah.
Peter.
I'm William Silver, hero to all.
Remember him? Remember this guy?
Remember me?
It's good to have you back, buddy.
Oh, thank you. Good to be back. This is all aligned today and hopefully next week as well. We'll see how it goes. I'm week to
Fingers
week, day to
crossed.
day at this point. Yeah.
Unfortunately, extenuating circumstances pulled both Tasia and Gray from our grasp today. So it's just you and me, bud. You can find out
Yes.
more about what remains of Momentous at momentous.tv/links. Hopefully, we'll have the whole band back together next week. We'll see.
Yes.
This time of year,
Yeah.
things happen. Speaking of this time of year, this is the time of year when it gets so freaking cold in this old house of mine that it can never
That you
get quite
dress
warm.
like a
My hands
hobo?
are always freezing. Yes, exactly. I prefer street urchin, but yeah, downstairs in
need
our
a
office.
barrel.
Ooh,
You need a barrel
exactly.
in the middle
No
of your
oil
living
can with a
room.
fire going. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's just hard to stay warm. It's the single pane glass, the drafty, everything in this old house. But some people have real problems, so at least we're not in
Yes.
certain parts of the world where their heating oil and gas has been severely restricted thanks to geopolitical events.
Yeah.
So let's get into it, shall we? We'll start with a little bit of a follow-up. Well, you weren't here for this, but we had there's some news a couple of weeks ago. A little guy named SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, founder of FTX and Alameda Research, the related hedge fund. Basically, everything fell apart, and he went from $16 billion net worth to virtually nothing. Yet he decided to insist on doing a bunch of interviews, basically trying to do the I was just incompetent parade, as opposed to I was actually a fraud. So, as it turns out, he was due to be questioned in front of some committee, U.S. government committee. I'm not sure if it was Senate or Congress committee. But before he was about to do that, they got arrested in the Bahamas, and they have an extradition agreement with the United States. So SBF is currently under arrest in the Bahamas and will likely be extradited to the United States, where he will be facing more than just a committee. Be facing some charges, including wire fraud and the like. So if you want more information on the whole case, we'll include a link, and you can go back to a couple episodes. I believe it was episode 90 or so that we got into it, or maybe 89. Defective Altruism was the title of that episode, because SBF was a big proponent of effective altruism. Some people believe that was all just to cover up the malfeasance. There was lots of money going to support various journalistic endeavors, various political parties, and some people felt that that was all so these organizations would run cover for him and kind of look the other way. Lots to come as this gets investigated, but just a little bit of follow-up. It gets pretty deep into the weeds quickly, but SBF is now in custody. That's the short version of that story.
As he deserves to be.
Exactly. Then, of course, we've got some follow-up on a whole bunch of Twitter news. So after halting Twitter Blue and then restarting it again in a rush under Elon's reign, and bumping it up to $8 a month, and that would include getting verified, but there was no actual verification scheme. So everyone wants that blue check mark, but the Twitter Blue 2.0 wasn't going to have a verification scheme to get that blue check mark. It was just pay to play. So and there were some other features that they're rolling into it, and then they halted it again, and now it's back again, but with a verification scheme. And it's $8 a month if you sign up through the web, $11 a month if you do it through the App Store. And that's because Apple takes a 30% cut. So Twitter's like, well, fine, then we'll raise the price. So that cut doesn't eat into our actual money. And that's after Elon Musk and Tim Cook. Some people say Tim Cook summoned Elon to Apple headquarters, Apple Park, to discuss, because he was beacon off in public about, is Apple opposed to free speech and this and that, because they had some concerns about the moderation failures, the firing of most of the moderation team, or gutting of much of the moderation team at Twitter. So they had a little confab. There was talk that Apple might be putting a bunch of their advertising on hold or vastly reducing the advertising budget. Turns out Apple is one of the largest advertisers on Twitter. So for them to go away would put a big dent in Twitter's pocketbooks, even more so given that so many other advertisers have paused their campaigns right now because they're a little concerned about the lack of moderation that's happening, and they don't want their ads to show up next to crazy tweets.
Yeah.
So maybe part of that conversation with Tim Cook from Apple was like, okay, hey, we're going to do this thing, and if we're going to do it through the App Store, we need to make more money, and we can't afford your 30% cuts. We're going to have to raise the price. And there's similar schemes have happened in the past with Netflix, and the past Apple's not really a huge fan of it, but you sign up for some services through the web, you get one price. To sign it up through Apple, you get a higher price just to account for that 30% VIG. Now, part of this new Twitter Blue system is a variety of check marks, including the standard blue check mark if you go through the verification process, a gray check mark, I believe, for certain institutions, governments, and businesses. And now there is a gold check mark to replace an official label on some business accounts. And gray will be for government and multilateral accounts, whatever that means. You go on their website and you can find more information on all the various check marks available. It's somewhat less confusing than it was before because it was a bit of a mess. And this is just another example of Twitter kind of making it up as they go along, and hopefully this Twitter Blue feature will have settled for a while anyhow.
I was reading and listening to some things over the last couple of weeks, and apparently this is a hallmark of Elon Musk and how he runs companies in general, is that there's particularly been some complaints about Tesla, and that things, in an industry where things are usually thought out and planned years in advance, he would just change things week to week, day to day, and just come up with things that would be implemented fairly soon after. So it sounds like this sort of shooting from the hip kind of thing is a hallmark of Elon. We maybe see it less. It's less public in some of his other companies. This is, literally a mouthpiece. So it kind of is a little bit more obvious when these things are happening, whereas people aren't noticing when random crappy decisions are made at SpaceX or Tesla or something like that.
Yes, in the corporate world, we like to refer to that as agile development.
Oh, yes, agile.
Yeah, and there are and to be fair, it's interesting how that whole approach has worked at Tesla, because they don't have model years for their cars.
No.
If you notice that, they just kind of keep tweaking as they go along. And there may be I think there are enough checks and balances in there that they don't do a lot of crazy stuff and have to walk it back. But I'm sure with their prototypes, they do a lot. But before things roll out, it has to have passed muster, and a whole bunch of safety stuff and government regulations and whatnot as well. When it comes to software, they have added more interesting features on the software side, including a number of video games, which you can control using your steering wheel, not while driving, only when you're parked. But with Twitter, since it's a pure software play, there's no real hardware involved here, they can afford to be a bit more loosey-goosey as long as they don't break the core of the platform. With these add-on features, might be a bit of a different story. One of other wrinkles to this whole... Go ahead.
Oh, I was just about to say, sorry, is that's the thing, is like software you can screw around. And Elizabeth Holmes kind of showed this, is that this fake it till you make it, this like making it up as you go along, this live beta, that works in software. It doesn't work with something that could smash into a building. It doesn't work with something that you're injecting into your body or something like that. So
Or
that's
pulling out of your
where,
body and trying to
or
test.
pulling out of your body. Ooh, hey now. So that's
There knows.
where
It's blood. That's all.
yeah, I know. That's where these physical things, you can't approach them like software. So that's probably benefited Tesla, is that this agile software internet world that he came from, you know, doesn't work with cars, or spaceships. You have to have some more checks and balances and oversight, and clearly he's
Mhm.
accepted that. But we're maybe seeing more of the crazy
It's
in
like
Twitter.
all bets are off again. It's like the
All
old
bets
days,
are
20
off.
years ago. Yeah, when he was doing
Yeah,
Zip2 and X.com. So it's more, it'll be interesting. I mean, the neat part of this whole situation, and we've talked about this before, is it's all being done out in the open. Like the
yeah,
transparency is
exactly.
fascinating. Whereas a lot of companies, such as Apple, this is all behind closed doors, and they don't show you anything until it's virtually
But
perfect.
because this is such a public company, I mean, their business is speech, right? Their business is empowering
Mhm.
people to talk, and we notice this. We notice these things. Now, having said that, I think I've heard you say it, and I've heard other people say it. My experience with Twitter has not changed one iota, but
Yeah.
because I wasn't talking to people on Twitter, I was using it as a news feed.
Yeah.
So
And if you're following who you're following, you know, no big whoop. It's the people who are, I don't know, a little Twitter delirious that their experience changes the most because they're the ones who are looking
yeah,
for a fight half the time.
yeah,
So one of the side effects of this whole badge realignment situation with Twitter Blue is that apparently the legacy of verified check marks are going to be going away in a few months, and these are the ones that were applied to people who were that they said they weren't, but there wasn't necessarily there a process. Originally it was just like whoever Twitter deemed worthy of a check mark. There was a while, Tasia's explained this to us in the past, where you could go and apply to be verified, but that got shut down pretty quickly because I think the amount of people applying was maybe a bit overwhelming, and they didn't have the staff to deal with it. But the interesting wrinkle here is that anyone in the past scheme who had their precious blue check mark and it was a badge of honor, that's going to go away. And unless they are a government institution or a certain type of company, they're not going to get an automatic check mark anyway. Anyway, they're going to have to fork over their $8 to Twitter to go through the process, just like all the normies do, and get their blue check
yeah.
mark that way. It's no longer a status symbol. It's simply what it was kind of supposed to be. What a lot of people felt it was supposed to be is that you are who you say you are. So of course, the people who are most choked about this situation is those who had that. Now it's kind of being taken away. And Elon's response is like, now pay $8. So you'll see
Yeah,
him on Twitter, like people will be griping and he'll be like, thank you for your input, now pay $8. It's like,
yeah,
all right, we'll see how that plays out, if that kind of subscription revenue can replace the lost advertising revenue. And
yeah,
it's interesting. Of course, one thing we weren't really getting into today, but it's like the Twitter files have kind of come out, and that is a lot of the investigation regarding the situation around the Hunter Biden laptop and how that story was suppressed in
yeah.
Twitter and other social media sites, and even you couldn't even DM that story to other people. And it turned out like there was this whole coordinated effort inside Twitter to suppress it, and there's some reporting from sort of a left of center reporter named Matt Taibbi and more of a right of center reporter named Barry Weiss, casting a whole light on what a lot of people feel is the rot inside Twitter. Like they felt it was their mission to kind of control the truth, and they had pressure from the government as well. The on or certain political operatives, including the FBI, is like, oh no, you can't let this story get out, even though it ended up being true. Like it was, they had been warnings that there was going to be a Russian disinformation campaign, et cetera, and they thought, oh, maybe this is it. No, it turns out it was actually true. And the New York Post had their Twitter account suspended for a while until they promised to take it down. I'm not sure if they ever did, but they got their account back online. It was a huge controversy at the time, and people like, it felt like there was political preferences were on display at Twitter for that whole situation. So, we'll add a link in the show notes. Let's not get into it because we try to avoid politics here, but it's kind of fascinating digging into the political side of Twitter, and how when you've got 97% of the staff at one point lent a certain direction politically, 97%, then that's going to sway how decisions are made, right? Like that doesn't feel like a healthy balance. Some other quick Twitter follow-up. Something's a little concerning. Twitter's disbanded its Trust and Safety Council of external advisors. 3 members had resigned and criticized Musk's leadership. So it's like, fine, we're going to shut it down altogether. This was supposed to be the board, the arm's length board to help adjudicate certain issues. And we'll see what happens here. It may be replaced again. Or reformulated. But in the meantime, this is the kind of thing that makes advertisers a little concerned and might make them pause their ad campaigns a little more. But not a great look. Hopefully they get something else in place sooner than later. If they care about advertisers, if they want to go all subscription and be a smaller company, goodness knows they've got fewer employees now. That's a different path to take. Maybe that, as long as Apple keeps advertising with them, right? They'll be their sugar daddy. Yeah. In more of what WTF Twitter news, Elon Musk now says Twitter's 280 character limit will increase to 4,000 characters. And your initial reaction to that will involve a string of obscenities. But why don't you just give us your
what the fudge?
Give us your initial thoughts. Give us your thoughts on this, because I've got thoughts. And
I mean, again, I haven't composed a full 4,000 word essay to respond to this, but it feels like that goes 4,000 characters. Sorry, I feels like that kind of goes against the whole idea of microblogging. Feels like a few of these things, he's just not getting the point about why they're being done, and he's a smart guy, so he must get it. But it's just like, I really don't understand this. This seems like not useful to how this operates and how people consume it and the whole idea behind it.
Yeah, because if you're going to make it that long, it's just called blogging at that point. The whole point of Twitter at the beginning was that it was so short. It was initially 140 characters. And for those who are interested, the reason why it was 140 characters is that Twitter launched in 2006 at a time when there weren't a lot of smartphones in existence. This is pre-iPhone. So one of the ways that people are interacting with Twitter was via SMS. And SMS has a 160 character limit. So they carved off 20 characters for whatever reason, technical overhead protocols or whatever, and left 140 characters for users. And that defined the nature of Twitter. It set it apart from other social platforms where you had virtually unlimited unlimited, or virtually no limits. That's me speak English good.
And I think this also plays into the nature, though, of how people consume content on a digital platform. They tend to scan. I taught a whole course on writing for the web or writing for digital media, and part of the idea is about leading the eye, but also doing quick little snippets so that they can consume it, move on, and that particularly helps with the scrolling, where you can go through a lot of things. You don't have to go through one thing in 4 scrolls. You can go through 6 things. So this is where I think he's ruining some of the special sauce of the platform.
So whether it actually happens is another story. I'm convinced that half of what's going on is simply trial balloons to stay in the news. If you think about it, it seems like there's literally a new Twitter story every day. And after a while, you must start running out of ideas. So let's just throw crazy stuff out there. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, he enjoys attention. I mean, part of this is just attention, right?
Exactly. So. Yeah. So to be fair, a year or two ago, Twitter did add the option to add a note of up to 10,000 characters to a tweet. I'm not sure how many people actually use that. Often when people have something to say that exceeds 280 characters, they'll just do what's known as a tweet storm, and they'll have a whole thread. They'll just keep replying to themselves, and it'll make a little story that way. it can get a little wonky if people start replying to some of the individual tweets, and it's hard if you're the completionist and you like to read all the discussion on there. You kind of have to pop in and out, and the interface and the experience is not all that great. So anyhow, this is a fingers crossed for me. I hope that they do not go ahead with this, because like, it's just blogging at this point. And like you say, it makes it hard to scroll. Like, one of the reasons why Instagram's been so successful, it's like initially it was just like the squares, just scrolling squares.
Yeah.
And now they've made it other shapes, and a lot of people like to do their vertical thing, and we've got video in there, and it's a little less scrollable. I mean, Vine back in the day, how do you make video scrollable? Only 6 seconds. So that's not too long.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got TikTok, which is, that snackable content as well that people like to scroll. It gets longer and longer. The longer the video gets, the less scrollable it is. And I think the same would apply to text as well. So maybe we should tweet at Elon, Will, and say, stick to 280, dadgummit.
He'd be like, give me $8.
Exactly.
Shut up, Elon.
Thank you for your input. Pay $8. Exactly.
Yes.
Well done. Okay, so my favorite of the Twitter updates this week is apparently, since they've laid off they laid off half their staff, another 1,000 kind of quit or took severance because they didn't want to go extremely hardcore, and so they're operating at about a quarter to a third of their previous staffing levels. So what do you know? Got a bunch of extra office supplies hanging around, or office equipment, such as chairs and fancy industrial strength espresso machines and the like. So yeah, I mean, you could. There's an auction site where this is all being auctioned off. You could get yourself a Twitter bird statue, an @ symbol sculpture planter. Both of those are starting at just $25 US. And one of many espresso machines, like these are the kind you would find at a cafe. Manual flywheel slicer with stands. So there's a lot of kitchen equipment here, monitor stands, rotisseries with accessories. So obviously they had a full-on kitchen. I mean, that's one of the I guess some of the victims of the layoffs maybe have been kitchen staff. I don't know if they still have cafeteria facilities there.
What's
or not.
That?
Live, part of a live video production system as well. Refrigerated pizza prep table, rocker chairs in oak and scarlet. Now this is
nice.
It's. Yeah, there's some nice furniture here, but this is where it starts getting me a little crazy. Oh, they've got some stationary bikes for recharging your devices, mobile TVs on stands. Now, when you go through to the actual auction site, okay, this is where I start understanding the concerns about the bloat at Twitter. You've got tons and tons of these fancy designer chairs, Eames chairs, starting bid $50 US. You know what these retail for?
No.
Between $1,500 and $2,000 US. Why on God's green earth does any company need chairs that expensive? I'm sorry. Like,
I need me one of those chairs.
Right? But I mean, that's like, if I was an investor at Twitter, I'd be furious. Like, sure, you want people to be comfortable, but like, these aren't even office chairs for
those
people
aren't
at their
office
desk.
chairs.
No, these are just like, I don't know if they're for meetings or just lounge chairs. Yeah, they're actually, technically, they're called lounge chairs. It's like, what is going on there? So,
well, the deli slicer is a little fancy. It makes more sense now that there's a kitchen, but it's just like, why the hell is there a deli slicer?
Yeah, I mean, some of that equipment makes perfect sense, but then when you start getting into the extravagant, I'm sorry, $1,400 to $2,000 for lounge chairs, and and they're not even kind of the chairs that people would lounge in much. They're just for sitting in.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Partner with a Polytechnic Institute where they're having like students design and build wooden furniture. How about that instead? Support your community. I mean, all riled up, Will. Being the kind of person who goes on Facebook Marketplace to find office chairs. How many can I get for $100? Like,
whoop, whoop.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's like too much money makes companies like fat and lazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that I have an opinion on the matter. All right, should we get into some happier news?
Let's do it.
And that's happier news where it's going to quickly exceed our grasp to even understand it. How about that?
Yes,
Fusion
I
energy breakthrough. There were rumors going around, news going around yesterday that the U.S. Department of Energy was going to be announcing a major breakthrough in the development of fusion energy, and they
fusion.
delivered today. The major milestone was announced, and the National Ignition Facility has achieved net energy gain in a fusion reactor for the first time. So, just to set the table a little bit, our traditional nuclear power been that we've harnessed for decades now is it employs a fission reaction. That is when you are applying a certain amount of energy to bust atoms apart and cause a train. You got to get it to a certain critical mass. You got a chain reaction, and hilarity ensues. You got an extreme amount of energy, whether that's put toward good purposes, such as creating nuclear power, or, or purposes that are a little more controversial, such as nuclear weapons. Now, the problem with fission power is that you end up with a certain amount of nuclear waste spent in the form of spent fuel rods, which basically have to be buried inside a mountain for tens of thousands of years before they're harmless enough. Now, the dream of fusion power is that you would basically get say a cup's worth of seawater, and that would be able to power, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of homes, because what you're doing is you're smashing particles together and harnessing the energy from that. But in order to get energy out of those, it's created when those articles are fused, hence fusion, you need to apply a lot of energy in the form of some of the most powerful lasers ever invented in the history of humankind. So when you
192
are,
apparently.
yeah, so when you have to apply that much energy, you want to make sure that the energy you're getting out of it actually exceeds it. Otherwise, what's even the point, right? So this is the breakthrough that we're talking about. In short, is that they finally have a net gain whereby they've got reaction going, and it's now producing a certain percentage more power than the energy required to get it all going in the first place. And so they generated about so last year they were about 0.6 megajoules short. They used 1.9 megajoules of energy to create 1.3 megajoules of energy, so that's still a deficit. And then just recently they crossed the threshold, and I'm not sure if we have the exact figures there. Don't seem to. Oh, they used about 2 megajoules of energy to power the lasers, and we're able to get about 3 megajoules out. Yeah, so that's a 50% increase. So that's great. I mean, ultimately, you want to get that higher and higher, get that ratio higher. So, because you still, like they say, it takes money to make money. It takes energy to make energy, right? So, but this is a great sign. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is still going to be decades before this actually, gets to commercial application. Some people are saying the 2030s. Some projects, they figure like 2050. So,
Oof.
it could be anywhere from a decade to 3-ish decades away. And the only thing, though, is that we tend to overestimate progress in the short term and tend to underestimate in the long term. So maybe it'll be sooner. Like, it's not going to be next year. We're not going to be using fusion power to solve all our energy problems in the next couple of years, but maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. Like, it could, these discoveries and achievements tend to compound. So maybe it'll be sooner than the predictions are. Maybe they're being a little conservative.
Once it gets
we shall see.
Right?
Exactly.
Once it gets momentum, it's critical mass, and you get the early adoption out of the way, and then you get to actually streamline it. More people jump on rather than it being difficult to manage and create. That more people can create it, it sort of speeds up exponentially.
Now, one of the challenges, however, is that there are, of course, vested interests in having this type of energy not go mainstream, such as the fossil fuel industry, big oil, big coal, even the renewables industry, big solar, big wind,
big solar.
Like after you have. I mean, they're all lots of companies that have vested interests in their just being able to sell their own stuff. Now, the things with the problem with solar and wind, of course, is that it's not consistent. But nuclear, whether it's fission or fusion, it's consistent, right? And that's why oil and gas and coal have been so handy. Is that you get the energy when you need it. You burn the coal, you burn the oil, you burn the gas. Hydropower has been so convenient because their dams are like big batteries. Basically, you release the water through the turbines when you need it. You got a steady supply of power. But if the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining, some of the other popular renewable sources, even though the prices have been really coming down, they're not reliable. So then what do? At nighttime or when it's not windy, you need to build gigantic battery complexes, battery farms. Well, that requires a lot of mining of certain minerals and stuff like that, and that has its impacts as well. So fusion is really the dream. But what happens when energy prices plummet? You're going to see like these legacy industries like potentially crater, and that's going to result in huge disruption, people out of jobs, etc. And you can't just tell these people, oh yeah, just learn to code or learn how to become a nuclear scientist or whatever. So, I mean, there are some knock-on effects, but hopefully by announcing this now, that people will start to make alternate arrangements, get their kids to study particular things in school as opposed to not other things. And so we're ways away yet, but it is definitely promising. And I think it's a little while before we have Mr. Fusion tacked onto the back of our DeLoreans.
Please. Yeah. I'd like one of
we'll
those.
Get there. We'll get there eventually. I mean, what's your take, Will, on this is has amazing potential. We've been talking about fusion for literally decades. I remember in elementary school they were talking about tabletop fusion, and could they eventually they're trying to do it at room temperature and whatnot, or in it was the whole discussion with superconductors as well. And it's always been 10 years away, 10 years away, 10 years away. But it feels like now it actually might be 10 years away or 20 or 30. But we finally have crossed that threshold. More energy out than we're putting in.
No, it's definitely encouraging. But like you say, I mean, I think you need to take it with a grain of salt. It's certainly a breakthrough. But, there's been other science breakthroughs that I haven't heard much about recently, like what happened to CRISPR? What happened to cold fusion? Like some of these things, like, let's see if it takes off, and definitely got to pass the threshold. It's a huge, encouraging development, but where's it go from here? That's the important thing, right? And to your point, we don't have a Mr. Fusion next week or next year or 5 years from now, maybe 10 or 20 years from now. But yeah, the important thing is to get to that point, right? This is a great milestone, but can we move on from that?
Exactly. Well, yeah, cold fusion, like I kind of alluded to with, that was always a dream. But so this is hot fusion. So this is not the cold fusion dream. This is decidedly hot fusion. 192 lasers worth of hot fusion. But so that's why, I mean, it's such a trick to keep that energy contained, right? Like, I mean, it can have a bad time if it's not built properly, and but if they can scale it, and they've got the energy output now, so it's just a
I love hot fusion. It's so much better than trance or Eurobeat.
A hint of jazz in there too.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't worry about conserving energy, folks. We're gonna get a whole lot of it cheap and soon, right?
Yeah, just burn your paper now.
I got to do something about the energy situation in my house because these fingers are freezing. Okay, what else do we have? So we got a couple articles there on the whole fusion situation. One about the exciting news and one about, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
In other news, this was something I've been hanging on to for a little while. I just thought it was a fun thing. We've got a couple things on theme to talk about here. There's a YouTuber named Luke Miani that I've been following for a few years, and he did a little project whereby he gutted a Mac Mini. I think it was a 2011 Mac Mini. It was an older model. The form factor has been pretty similar for a while now, and he thought that would be a nice form factor for a Nintendo Wii. And nice and sleek, a little bit more modern looking and whatnot. So if you go through this video, it's it's just one of those, like, why on earth would someone do that sort of projects? But it's also,
But those are the best.
kind of fun.
I love those on Instagram where people are, turning old Mac 2s into something crazy or
One of the examples that people have been doing for a long time on classic Macs, like the kind from the mid to late '80s and early '90s,
yeah.
is converting them into Aquaria. So,
Yeah.
notice I said Aquaria, the plural of aquarium.
Hmm.
So,
Edgemont
anyhow, so
W.
and we have a Mac Plus that we used to have on the set of our TV show, Get Connected, back in the day. It's down in our home office right now that my wife Stephanie had converted into an aquarium, which was pretty cool too. So in this case, basically gutting both a Nintendo Wii and a Mac Mini, and putting the guts of the Nintendo Wii into said Mac Mini, and yeah, I mean, why not? I guess.
Yeah, good
But
times.
so my question to you then, Will, is if you could have like some kind of, I don't know, modern tech, like, I mean, this is kind of a weird, like, the question I was going to ask is, what kind of modern tech would you like to put into an old device? This isn't
Mm.
exactly that, because the Wii is actually older than this Mac Mini, I think. No, he puts it. Oh, no. He does it the other way around. I'm sorry. He put the guts of an M1 Mac inside of the Wii. They say he put the Mac Mini guts inside of the Wii. That's even stranger to me. And then I think ran a
Yeah.
Wii emulator on the Mac. That's what he did. Okay. Ugh. Sorry, old age. My grandmother
Weird.
said, getting old ain't for wimps. Okay, so my question to you then, now that I've finally remembered what we were talking about here.
What old thing and a new thing?
Yeah, what old guts would you like? No, what new guts would you like in an old okay, I'll give you an example. I always thought it would be cool to have like a castle or some like kind of really old timey home. I mean, we got a pretty old timey home here actually, and have it like totally wired up. So with all modern conveniences, but in a subtle way, so it didn't look too gadgety. In a very subtle way, our home here is 80, pushing, said 80. It's over 85 years old now, and when we bought it, we had to replace all the electrical wiring because otherwise we couldn't get insurance. But while we
Yeah.
did that, we wired Cat 5 cable and phone cable and coaxial cable to all the rooms, so that we are fully wired. We're not relying on Wi-Fi unless absolutely necessary. And that was great. It's like, got this old building with modern wiring. So it's kind of like an adjacent sort of example. But Will, I know that you've got certain types of devices that you may or may not collect. And some of
Yes.
those like old classic exteriors might house some interesting interiors. Do you have any thoughts on what new stuff you might want to put it in an old shell?
Well, I mean, I think okay, there's a couple obvious things for me, but one that's kind of already been done to death is just an old arcade cabinet and putting modern video games in it, because there's something about the
Mm-hmm.
look of an arcade cabinet. I think a lot of emulators can be quite dodgy, so I think it would be
Mm-hmm.
nice to put like a PS5 in there or something like that. That would be cool. In terms of uh, this is a bit of a deep cut and more of my kind of thing, would be to get an old mixer like a let's say a Vestax 07 and put an audio card in there and have it so it can fire up Serato or Tractor or something like that. That
Mm-hmm.
would be
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool. There's not a lot of room in there, so that might be you might have to work on making things a little bit more micro, or creating some room some ways. There's some cool stuff that people do with mixers, with old mixers, like cut out the bottom of them, put plexiglass, and put like lights and stuff in the bottom.
Of course, RGB,
So
all the
stuff like
things.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry, ground
RGB,
effects.
all the
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
yeah. Well, especially because lights, LED lights are don't take much power, so they're not going to burn out the mixer. You can usually run them off the existing power supply, and they're so small that you can tuck them into those old frames. So that's kind of a minor thing, but I'd love to be able to do something like that. I'm just way too afraid. I'm not that good at electronics, and cutting into an old mixer scares the Jesus out of me. So I wouldn't want to cut into an old mixer and try to hook up some LEDs in there.
Gotcha. One of the things that people that this sort of device has been on the market for the last few years. There's been a line of mini versions of consoles and home computers.
Yes.
So we had the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System Mini, the SNES Mini. We've had the C64.
I have a
Mini,
Genesis.
like a version.
I have a Genesis Mini.
Exactly. So a lot of those are powered by Raspberry Pi, which is a modern, like little tiny computer, but you put into kind of retro style guts. I mean, they make recreations. Sometimes they're full size and sometimes they're mini size, and that's kind of neat as well. But there's just something sort of appealing of having a certain type of a newer device, but in an old shell. So it's kind of on the down low.
Sorry, my cat was trying to attack something, so I got distracted for a second. What did you find, Coco?
In related, somewhat related news, this is something I know that you've been waiting for a long time. Being a huge fan of Super Mario, finally, there is a one-dimensional version of Super Mario available. Not 3D like with the versions of Super Mario that we saw with the Nintendo 64 and newer, like Super Mario 64, and not 2D like we had with the NES, but this is 1D, where you see what Mario would see in his flat world, right? So if you turn the screen sideways, the screen is 2D. This is what he would see running along in his little world from a first-person perspective.
It's absurd.
It's absurd. And you can download this and play it. You can download it for Windows, Apple, Mac, and Linux.
Humans have too much time on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, so you're going to download it, aren't you?
I think I'm good, dog.
But it's got the music. Like I want to see how good you are at this, because you've got a few different versions of.
Did you download it and play it?
Not yet. I have yet to try it out. But you're our official Nintendo correspondent, Will.
Well, I have to tell you, the real power behind the throne is my wife. She is a Mario maven. I don't know if that's an official term. Not sure. Like an Instagram maven, because I don't know if you've seen some of the people. I follow some people on Instagram that do some crazy stuff with Mario Brothers. I'll send you a video sometime. They must spend a lot of time figuring out how to make these things happen, but she's pretty darn good at Mario.
All right. Well, when she's back in the saddle, see how good she does at Mario 1D.
Mario 1, yeah, no, she ain't got no time for that. Let me just tell you, she ain't gonna.
It's one chunky pixel wide. I look forward to seeing her give that a go. We talked about this, I think, before you left us for a bit, but now there is a second trailer for the Super Mario Brothers movie, and
yes, I remember. Tasia had Italian rage for the for the non-Italianist. I still say the solution to all of this is just to have a frickin' Brooklyn accent.
Yeah, I mean, instead we've got just a kind of generic Chris. What's his face? All the Chris. One of the Chris's. All the actor Chris's. Why is his name escaping me? From Guardians of the Galaxy.
Chris Evans.
Nope. That's Captain America.
Sorry, I just have to. My cat is causing hijinks. What are you after?
It's not Chris Pine.
Say hi to the internet.
I'm watching a Super Mario trailer right now. Oh, hi, Coco. Okay. Good stuff. Come on, who's the guy in Guardians of the Galaxy? Who's in the office?
Oh, Jesus. Chris something or other. Not Chris Evans.
No, this happens to me once in a while. I blank on this stuff. Anyhow, from what the additional details that you've seen in this second trailer, is it made you more excited, less excited, kind of the same?
I
Do you
have to
care
tell
about the
you,
fact that he's? Mhm.
I don't care about the voice. I know this is like internet rage. It
Mhm.
doesn't bother me, and for the people that it does, that's fine. I respect that, but for me, it just doesn't bother me. I mean, the Sonic thing didn't even bother me all that much, but
The
I
freaky
get that
Sonic.
more. I
Yeah.
get that more because that was creepy. Have you seen Rescue Rangers, by the way? Because
Not
you
yet.
need to.
Sorry.
Oh
I know. I
gosh,
need to
you
see
gotta
it. Yeah.
see that. Anyway, so the Sonic, the when they changed the Sonic character in the first Sonic movie that they did a couple years back because he had too realistic teeth and didn't look like
And his
the
eyes were
video game.
little, and it was just all kinds of
Yeah,
wrong. Yeah.
it was an abomination. I grant you that was an abomination, but I sort of figured at the time that's like a kids movie. Why do I care about it? Like I love Sonic the Hedgehog when I was like 10 years old, but I'm not going to go and see that movie.
Mhm.
I'm good. I'm good. So that didn't bother me all that much. I'm going to see this Mario movie and this doesn't bother me at all. So I kind of feel like there's a little bit of internet rage. I have more of a problem with the recasting of the voice for Buzz Lightyear and what they did there with the Buzz Lightyear because it used to be because when they did the Lightyear movie,
Yeah.
it was the movie that inspired. And so there was a
Yes.
different voice actor. It wasn't Tim Allen. It
Oh,
was probably one of the other Chris's.
it was Chris Evans. Yeah.
Yes. So, like that one just felt like, why even bother? Like, why is this even the original or based off the original? And I think we discussed this in another show, but it's like it like had this premise, but like the movie didn't fulfill on that. It wasn't an action movie that a kid in the '90s would like. There was too much learning and a moral code behind that, not
Mm.
ice to
Mhm.
see you or something. So um, yeah, that one was a debacle. I just don't have a problem. There's just not an accent here. It doesn't bother me. I think the natural thing, I think part of, my suspicion, I could be wrong, was they didn't want to do a stereotype Italian voice.
They didn't want
Because
to make Mario sound like Mario sounded like all the modern Mario video games.
yeah,
Like
but
that's the
it's
crazy
New
part.
World. People would get outraged about that. So the solution is do a Brooklyn accent, because no one will get outraged about that, because everyone hates Brooklyn. I'm just
Well, I
joking.
think part of it is, I mean, they could have just used the voice actor that's been doing Mario for however long, but
Yeah.
they wanted a big name. I think that's part of the
You
calculus
think
there.
so? I think
They're
part
not
of it
going to
was
have
they
like
didn't want to do an Italian accent.
they're not going to have like Tony Pepperoni or whatever the guy's name is that
Tony Pepperoni.
who did the original voice for Super Mario. So they wanted to have a big name actor that they can bring to the bank, right? A
Yeah.
bankable name,
Yeah.
and to have someone non-Italian, because I guess there weren't any available Italian actors that could pull off the Mario voice and not get canceled in the process. Anyhow, we've done that discussion to death previously, especially with Rage Tasia. But what about
Yes.
the trailer itself and what you've seen in the visuals there, and maybe
Yeah.
anything inkling you can get from the story? Does it capture your imagination at all? Or is it just like, oh
Yeah.
well, I'll see it?
It
Like, are
looks
you excited?
interesting.
Okay,
Yeah, no, I am excited. It looks
okay.
like they've really taken a lot of the game there. I mean, I'm a huge Mario fan.
Mhm.
My wife is actually good at playing Mario, better than I am. But I remember going and being disappointed by the Bob Hoskins version. I went to that in the theaters. I was psyched for that, and I was like, what am I watching? So
Yeah,
actually, I
Bob
got
Hoskins and John Leguizamo. Is that who it
yeah,
was? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. As Luigi. Yeah.
And what's his face from American? Oh crap. Dennis Hopper.
Oh wow.
He
Okay.
was.
I
He
haven't
was
seen
Bowser,
that
I
movie
think.
either. So
Oh, you
okay.
haven't?
No, I'm
Well,
not.
do yourself a favor and don't ever watch it. Actually, by the way, off screen, I need to tell you a story
Okay.
that relates to this. But anyways, yes, sometimes doing a dark, gritty, real version of a video game or comic book is not a wise idea and ends up actually hurting the franchise.
Mm,
So I think that this, to me, is just like the video game being brought to a movie format. I
right.
would wonder if that would be another complaint, is that this is just like looking at the video game.
That's kind
Um,
of, yeah,
and I know that some people sort of said this is just a long cutscene.
yeah.
So I'm okay with that, but it does feel like, why is this a big budget movie?
Hmm.
When it looks better than the video games, but it does sort of feel like you're not changing the art style. It's not going to 3D, so it just looks like really good animation that's in the style of the video games. So, you know, not, I should say, realistic 3D. It's not like,
Hmm.
the Lion King where it was,
Yeah.
animated and then go into 3D.
I have to confess, I'm of that mindset as well. Like, I'm a bit more curious to see how they could make something translate into the real world as opposed to seeing, a quote unquote extended cutscene. I think they did a good job with, say, Detective Pikachu, where it was where they melded. It was, they kind of took the Roger Rabbit approach, and we saw that together, and I
Yeah,
I, I enjoyed
I
it.
liked it. I
It didn't take
now
itself too seriously, and you had the Pokemon were just in the world of humans, and it looked good. It looked
Yeah.
believable.
Now, having said that, I've never played Detective Pikachu, so I didn't have a reference to the original game, but I like the idea of the concept of Pokemon just being in the real world and
Hmm.
how you would live with that. So I thought that was super interesting. I liked that movie a lot, actually.
Maybe they just felt that doing realistic renders of or realistic versions of the characters would not go well, given
Okay.
some of the renders that we've seen in the past, such as this one here. So if you try and make Mario too realistic, just exactly.
Can I tell you, you have a piece of homework, and I'm serious about this. You have to do
I
this.
I do so much
No,
homework
no,
already
you
for this
do.
show.
No, you
Uh
do.
huh.
Listen to me. You have to do this. You have to watch the Chip and Dale Rescue
Okay.
Ranger
Okay.
movie by
Yes.
next Tuesday.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Yes,
If you're gonna
do
come
it.
over and watch it with me,
You come over here.
who's got the
I'm
better setup?
lonely. It's me
Yeah,
and the
come on over.
cats.
Come on over. This side of the bridge. You can come this way for a change.
No.
We've got the setup. We'll go down to the man cave. It's not a sex thing. Okay, so let's move on to the next story. We've beat Super Mario to death. I'm glad you're
Don't beat
excited.
him to death. What did he do to you?
I'm not that excited. We'll see what happens. I still
Okay.
haven't seen the Sonic movies, frankly. Like, I just don't watch as much pure animation nowadays. Like, it's really got to
Yeah, I
be
know you're
something
not a
I'm
huge
excited about.
animation
I mean,
person.
I was, but I've just, like,
Yeah.
over time, it's like, I don't know. Part of the problem is just there's too much to watch. Now, one animated franchise that I did really enjoy, well, movie I did enjoy, and it's now, it's part of a larger franchise, is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and we're getting a sequel next year, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, featuring the return of Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen as she evolves into Spider-Woman, and then we're also going to have a an alternate universe Spider-Woman featured as well. What did you think of the original Into the Spider-Verse? Well,
I loved it. I love the whole Spider Verse idea that they've done in the comic books. There was a good run about 10 years ago that I really enjoyed. Also, really started with a lot of the Madam Web stuff in the late '90s Spider-Man uh, animated series, which I enjoyed greatly in high school. So I mean, I love this whole idea. I think it's the way to really make Spider-Man pop. I really enjoy the different versions of Spider-Man. Spider-Man as a pig, Spider-Man as a cat, Spider-Man as a punk, Spider-Man as a cyborg.
mm-hmm.
I love all these things. I will say I can never think of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse without recalling that you and I went to this together. I may have said the story before on here, but I had a physical problem. I actually
Oh,
had
right.
intracranial hypotension, which is where the fluid from your brain is escaping and your brain is actually sinking down in your cranium. So there's a small rip in your spine and the fluid is going into your body,
And
and
hilarity ensued.
hilarity ensues. Now, if you've seen the first movie, it's quite psychedelic at some parts. And
Mhm.
when you and I left the theater, I couldn't walk down the stairs. You had to help me walk down the stairs. I had such a bad headache and was like tripping out so bad and had vertigo. But I greatly enjoyed the movie. I think we saw it in 3D, which only made it
Oh,
worse.
jeez.
So
Did you rewatch? Have you rewatched it since?
I have, yeah. And
Okay.
I do enjoy it. Now, I will say I saw it on Crave, and there's something off about the conversion because it was meant for 3D, I think. And so
Okay. Yeah.
it's a bit weird when I watched it. I watched it probably about a year and a half ago on Crave, and there's something wrong with the conversion when it's not supposed to be weird. It looks a bit weird.
Strange.
Yeah, it was weird. Anyways, great movie. I
Blu-ray.
really, really enjoyed it, but
think
I
you
can
own the
never
Blu-ray,
think of the
don't you?
movie without thinking about that story. So
Yeah.
thank you, Tristan, for helping me down the stairs. But that
You're
was a
most
trippy
welcome.
movie.
And I think if I recall, it's like I just threw you over my shoulders in
Yes.
a very masculine kind of way, and just like,
I'll get you out of here.
that's right. And I think, yeah, because the place was on fire as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Attacked by Martians. Yes.
Yes, and women swooned. So yeah, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. We will be seeing that one in the theater for sure. Stephanie enjoyed it as well when we watched it together on the system downstairs that you should come and watch
Man
Chippendale
Cave.
on. And yeah, it definitely holds up a second time. It's so many different animation styles representing the different universes, and we're going to see more of the same here. Hopefully they've got a good story, and it's not just because the gimmick is kind of done now. So, but
Yeah.
I have to admit, when I watched the trailer, the music to it and stuff, like I was getting a little the feels. I'm like, okay, this has
So
got
they
potential.
haven't even touched the gimmick yet. Let me tell you, in the comic books, they take the gimmick to 11. So there's an even bigger thing that happens at one point. So I don't know whether any of that's happening in the movie or any future movies, but there's a whole thing that happens at one point.
Mm-hmm. So now that we've done our little entertainment section,
Yes. What's
now
my pick of the
something
week?
we have our momentous picks.
Yes.
Bill, a pick of the week that I do not happen to see in the rundown.
That's because we had technical difficulties before. Just a sec. Processing.
Just tell me what it is. I can Google fast too.
Okay. There is a Muhammad Ali documentary, a two-parter that just I was watching last week. It was on HBO/Crave, and it's actually all clips. It's actually no talking heads, which for me is very, like, I love docs, but this is almost like just archival footage put together. And, you know, it's not like that's never been done, but it's just, for me, it was a nice change of pace not to have people color it with, yes, I believe that's it.
What's
It's a
my name?
two-parter. Yeah. So, basically it follows his life, but it's just clippings, video clips, or interviews. It's not, his manager being interviewed now at age 96. It's what they thought at the time. It's clips from the time. And it's, for me, that's hard to do, to tell a story with other people's clips and to try to have a narrative or follow. And they definitely pick clips that emphasize a theme that they're trying to say. So
Did it have voiceover or anything to it?
no,
Oh, wow.
it's all
Okay.
in his own voice. It's all him saying things. So there's occasionally, I think, things on the screen like years or something like that. I have to remember, but there's no narrator and there's no interviews. It's all just clips or archival footage or boxing footage, and it's really is interesting. It was, again, I know that this is it's not like this is the first time it's ever been done, but I just, see a lot of documentaries, and most of them, while I enjoy them, are, you feel like sometimes there's an axe to grind, or, someone's coloring a certain story a certain way, or recollecting it a certain way. I've
Hmm.
seen two documentaries on the same subject, and different people remember things differently, and you learn different things from one documentary as opposed to another. This is like you're just watching the footage, right? Like, and it all being put together is as it says in his own words. So it's mostly, and this is the other thing, is he talked a lot, so there's a lot of him talking.
Yeah.
So they put a lot of footage of him explaining his life or explaining what happened,
Uh-huh.
so it is him talking, and he's sort of the narrator, but there's nobody putting all the clips together in terms of any kind of narration. It's all just the editor putting the clips together and finding the right thing that tells the story at the time, and that must have been truly difficult. But if you're going to do it for anyone, Muhammad Ali did a lot of talking, and there's a lot of footage of him. So yeah, that's my recommendation, and I just saw it last week, and I do recommend it. I mean, you kind of have to be a bit of a sports. I'm a sports junkie. I enjoy learning about things. I knew a little bit about Muhammad Ali, but I learned a lot more, especially about some of his early life, and it was a very refreshing format and way of watching a documentary for me.
So a lot of talking and a lot of footage sounds like a perfect candidate for some deep fakes coming up.
Yes.
Can't wait for the Muhammad Ali deepfakes. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I think I know from my generation, and we are kind of in the same generation. Well,
Yeah.
within a few years, at least for me, I think like a lot of us are. The first boxer a lot of us ever knew about was indeed Muhammad Ali, because he
Yeah.
did like suck up so much of the media oxygen because of some certain stands that he took, and his there was his name change due to his change of faith, his refusal
Yeah.
to fight in Vietnam. It was controversial, but he was a principled person and a champion, right? Over and over again.
Well,
And to see other people challenge him was always interesting and exciting in the 70s and early 80s.
I think the other interesting thing, and I don't think well, it's all public and it's all just footage that anyone can watch.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the interesting things is, from my perspective, to think about him not being famous at a certain point, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a point where he becomes famous, but he's an underdog before that.
Right.
Like, he was the underdog against Sonny Liston. He was the person where they called him the lips. Like, his fists match his lips is
Mm-hmm.
what the headline was. So everyone knew he was a great talker, but yeah, he's not actually good. But you and he was a legend. He's almost like a myth. He's
Mm-hmm.
like Hercules or Zeus or something. It's like, to think about him not being that is kind of weird, right? Like, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh wow, there's a point where he wasn't famous. There's a point where he wasn't important.
Yeah.
So that to me was something too. I hadn't sort of put my mind in that direction, so it made me think in different ways. And to hear people talking about him before he was famous, because there's always a before you were famous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So especially with athletes, people will doubt you until you prove yourself. So there was a point where he proved himself, and to see his life before he had proven himself was quite interesting for me.
Yeah. How many people cared about Hal Jordan before he found that ring?
And now, how many people care about him now after that movie? Oh, too soon. Sorry.
You're saying.
CG suit fail. Sorry, I love Hal Jordan. I just said that to get
I
your
set
goat.
myself up. I set myself up. All right. Well, my pick of the week is something a little different and quite fun. Is a YouTube channel called Data is Beautiful, and you may have seen some clips going around the web in the past. They have over 1.25 million subscribers, and they just have data visualizations of all sorts of interesting stats over the course of time. And it's basically like watching an animated bar chart. It sounds like the dumbest thing in the world, but it's actually really neat to watch. And came up on my radar this week again this week because with all the talk of Twitter recently over the last several months in this unfolding drama, it was a good reminder that the success of any social platform doesn't last forever. And so in this visualization, it shows the most popular social networks from 2003 to 2022, and how MySpace was a thing, and there's something called High
What's
Five, which
high five?
I totally forgot about that. But there was also Friendster, Nexopia, and others, and we can see that YouTube took off, and surpassed them all quickly, and then Facebook, got in there. It started to gain momentum and took off, and you can see Google Plus gained
Google
traction,
Plus.
and then it went away. Twitter and Instagram, Snapchat coming up, and Reddit bobbing up and down. LinkedIn slow and steady. Pinterest. You've got Twitch TV in there as well.
Do you know, I actually see these all the time, and
oh, look at TikTok. TikTok's coming in 2018. Here it comes, racing up the charts.
Yeah, down the straight. Is standings for Premier League and MLS. They like to show at the end of the year how teams do over the course of time, and it's very interesting to see teams like go up and down, and then at the end it's basically they're all in their lanes and they stay once straight most of the time.
Another one that I thought would be relevant to our discussion, because we were talking superheroes, and that is Marvel versus DC, the most money-grossing movies from 1978. This is to 2019, so this one's a few years old. But you can see for the longest time, for the better part of a decade, it was mostly DC, mostly Superman movies, until they started making Batman movies in '89. And what they did here is they did in box office receipts, and then adjusted for inflation, and then also adjusted for ticket price as time goes on. So that's why you see some of the older movies continuing to increase their box office take, just to be able to compare apples to apples. So so what would the ticket prices be in 1996? How would Superman from 1978 be comparing to the others? And again, we see DC dominant for so long, and then when say we fast forward a little bit until we start to see in the mid 2000s some of the things like early 2000s, we started to see X-Men and the Spider-Man franchise, Fantastic Four, Hulk, but you start to see a lot more Marvel, and Spider-Man became quite dominant as time went on. And then we got to see the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. So with the first Iron Man movie, and then subsequent Iron Man movies, Thor, and then there's a game changer when Avengers came out, and it really, you started to see movies regularly blasting past $1 billion in worldwide box office receipts, and culminating with Infinity War and Endgame. So Avengers, the first Avengers and Age of Ultron, of course, were two of the big ones in the early in the Avengers run, and then in later years here it starts. We get pushing $3 billion for Infinity War by the time we're done with this chart. So really neat YouTube channel called Data is Beautiful, and you can check out all the different. They do things like popular web browsers, popular TV series, popular sci-fi movies, most popular websites, and best-selling phones, popular programming languages, video game consoles, and the like. So you can search for Data is Beautiful at YouTube.
Cool.
So check it out, Will.
I will.
So we've got a backlog of projects from you, since we haven't seen you since October. So this one,
to remember.
Yeah. So this one's a little Halloween-y, but let's get through, and we'll cover one a week for the next few weeks, so that you're back with us. But we'll do some catch up here. So what is Flares from the Crypt, Will?
Well, as you alluded to, this was my Halloween type looper with sort of dark, creepy beats. This came out shortly. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 days before Halloween, so late October. And it's just something I've started doing. This is my second time, so last year I did it as well. Just to have a theme and try to have some darker beats, and a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm not usually a dark horror movie guy. As you know, I don't even like horror movies. The truth be told.
We'll get you there
But
eventually.
yeah,
Need some more
so
nightmare fuel.
yeah, I need more nightmare fuel. I have enough nightmares, thanks, right now. But yeah, this is just it's a way of pushing myself a little bit to have a theme and to work towards it. I I'm actually doing a fun project right now, which I can't talk about, but it's basically I would never do that normally, and those are the projects that I like to do once in a while because I learn a little something from it. I learn new genres. You were explaining to me a genre of music that I did not know, and now I have certain songs stuck in my head. So
We look forward to the the fruit
oh
of.
man, it's so bad, but it's good, but it's so bad. I'll let you listen to it
More
at
to
some
come.
point,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, fortunately, it will never see the light of day, but I will let you listen to it.
Just can you remind us what flares mean? This is called flares from the crypt as opposed to tales from the crypt. What is a
Yeah.
flare in DJ parlance?
Well, a flare is actually a scratch move, or it's a type of scratch. It's a very famous, important scratch named after DJ Flair, and uh, basically it involves clicking the fader while moving the record. It was a bit of a revolutionary move when it came out in the late '90s. It's one of my favorite moves. That's why I named it that. Originally, I was going to call it Tears from the Crypt. And Tears works more like Tails, Tears.
Mm-hmm.
It played a little bit better, but the problem is when you look at the word tear, it looks like tear. So I
Yep.
didn't want it to be Tears from the Crypt. So I changed it to Flares from the Crypt. So getting into the minutia, I think I might have talked to you about this at the time
I do
last year
recall.
when I
Yeah.
was coming. Yeah. So I originally wanted to be called Tears from the Crypt, but I was afraid that people would be like, "Why is it Tears from the Crypt?" I just had to add that voice. By the way, that's the way the internet sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Flares
The
from the Crypt.
specifically the internet comments section.
Yes. Yeah. Why'd you do that?
So our friend and colleague Tasia Custodi has another video for us this week. It's the best cloud storage for business, where she reviews sync.com. So sync.com sounds like a bit of a competitor. So Dropbox's business solutions and others like box.com, formerly box.net. So this is a very rare sponsored video from Tasia. But even with sponsored stuff, she does her best to be objective. But it's nice that she is getting enough of a profile now that organizations are coming to her, just like she's on the list for Google now and getting sample products and whatnot.
It's
So
awesome.
in this video, she does a little walkthrough of sync.com, and you can check that out at her YouTube channel at youtube.com/Tasia Custodi. Will, I forgot to ask you, where can people find out about your work? I think you mentioned it, but I may have...
You can find out about my stuff. It's on Table Beats or Tableless.net on the apps. They can also find out a little. I do a lot of work on the IG, otherwise known as Instagram,
Mhm.
under at Crossfader Ninja. So yeah, I often post about beats and post when I release something.
Nice. And you can find out more about Momentous at momentus.tv/links. We did it, Will. Just you and me, bro.
I'm out of practice.
It's good to get back into
No
it.
F-bombs, though. I was
Well
impressed with
done.
myself.
Well
Yeah.
done. Hopefully, we'll have Gray and Tasia back next week and get the whole band back together. We've
Then
got
we'll
a
get
couple of
F-bombs for
special,
sure.
yeah, we've got a couple of special year-end episodes coming up before Christmas, and then looking forward to the year ahead. So that should be lots of fun. Maybe we'll get some special guests to join us as well. But until then, Will, thank you kindly. It's great to have you back. We hope you and everyone else who is out there, anyone, mom, dad, if you're out there, hope your week is truly momentous.